died to a terrible enemy, getting a lucky headshot, and stared at the screen in awe of what just happened. And if you were like myself, you have probably wondered what the game would be like if headshots were removed entirely. Well, today I'm going to be diving into this scenario at full force, starting off with this change's potential effects on the game's balancing. I think the biggest problem that would pop up when removing headshots is the inherent imbalance it would cause between the defense and the attack. As of right now, the attack has much better weapons to balance out the fact that they are the ones with time against them, and the defense have significantly worse weapons on paper, but that is okay because one-shot headshots still allows defenders to win gunfights. However, this no longer being a thing would mean the attackers could just walk through the defense in any gunfight, and they would be pretty much helpless since their guns on average are significantly worse. I wouldn't be surprised if the game shifted into an attacker-sided meta because of this, or at the very least the attack would become much more competitive on a win rate basis than they had been in the past. Because of these facts, the meta around guns would likely shift drastically. The most important factor would become DPS when choosing a weapon. This means guns like Valkyrie's MPX or Doc's MP5 that are low recoil and low damage weapons would immediately become useless, and players would start moving towards guns with high damage per second at all costs. Weapons on the defense that would come to mind would be the Vector, T5, VSN, and the K1A that all have good damage. The attack would be less reliant on DPS since almost all of their guns are good in this regard. Also on defense specifically, shotguns and DMRs will become the new standard. This is because shotguns can one-shot at close range, which can help to make up for the lack of damage from SMGs, and most DMRs can two-shot, which allows them to be competitive with attacker weaponry. We definitely are already in a DMR and shotgun meta on the defense, but I could see this becoming more of a dominant strategy with headshots being removed. Another thing on the weapon side of things that would get mixed up a lot is popular attachments. Magnification sights would likely become the least effective option. This is because one of the main reasons ACOG is used is to make it easier to hit headshots at distance, but obviously that won't matter if one-shot headshot no longer exists, so you would likely see players switching towards 1x sights to get the quicker ADS speeds. Outside of weapon balancing, the most selected operators would also probably get mixed up as well. I think at a minimum, one if not two of the healing operators would jump up into the top 10 of the pick rate charts. This is because the only real flaw with these operators right now are that they rely on themselves and teammates staying alive, and getting headshot immediately in a gunfight stops Doc from being able to heal himself or from Thunderbird being able to get utility out of Arcona Station. This is also why Rook would likely blow up in popularity as well, since he could help defenders stay alive, giving them an opportunity to be healed, and he could guarantee that they go down no matter what. And with the attacks weapons being so much stronger than the defense, these boosts provided by healing operators could be required in a hypothetical meta like this. And speaking of Rook and Doc, another thing related to HP that would be affected is operator speed and armor. Right now, people like to play 3 speeds for their ability to rotate quicker and to go for rush strategies. And since headshots exist, HP matters less. So the difference between a 3 armor and a 1 armor really does not matter as much. However, if it was removed, I could see a world where 3 armors start dominating the meta and where changing an operator to a 3 armor would be considered a buff, especially when combined with the previously mentioned healing operators, since you can make it as hard as possible for the enemies to win a gunfight against you. Now, as a side effect of people prioritizing health, players would likely wind up looking for ways to chip away at HP as much as possible. So this would likely lead to trap operators continuing to be a huge point in the meta. Operators like Legion and Capcan especially, since they are the most significant at chipping away through HP. This wouldn't be too different to today, where both of these operators have major influence, but their pick rate would likely spike even further. And another set of operators that would be in a similar scenario is shield operators. Now, obviously right now you can counter a shield operator by just shooting them in the head when they ADS, which means that if you are skilled enough, you can deal with them without having to use any utility. However, if one-shot headshot was to be removed, this would become a lot harder. This would likely cause shield operators, especially Blackbeard, to become even stronger, since they could guarantee they win a gunfight against pretty much any defender, since they can no longer be one-shot headshot. Now, obviously these shifts in the meta and the game's balancing would have massive effects on the game as a whole. However, how would the removal of one-shot headshot affect the playstyle of people in ranked? Well, firstly, I think it would cause players to get more aggressive because they could run by enemies or run into positions without having to worry about getting one-shot. This could result in rush strategies becoming more viable. We are already in a very aggressive meta right now, with shield operators, Ying, Grim, and other execution operators being vital for the attack. And I think this balancing decision would amplify this already annoying meta. Also, since shooting enemies through walls would become less viable, I could definitely see a world where players start droning less because they don't see a reason to. With one-shot headshot being removed, killing people through walls will become a much more difficult task, and this could cause some players to drone less. And we're combined with all the other side effects of removing headshots, those worse or lower ranked players who choose not to drone would likely be rewarded for this. And higher ranked players would begin playing the same way since they'd figure out that aggression would be rewarded. The only aspect of aggression that would be disincentivized is spawn peeking, since for spawn peeking to work consistently you have to hit a headshot, and this would probably be a good aspect of this change. However, I think the general theme of this video shows that aggression would likely be king in a headshot removal meta. Now, if these problems taken into account, how could Ubisoft implement this change while avoiding a lot of these issues? While I wouldn't want to necessarily have this occur, in this hypothetical scenario, I think the best way to implement this would be to not make it universal. What I mean by this is I would only remove headshots on wall bangs. This would remove a lot of those annoying deaths I mentioned in the intro, while still allowing players to be awarded for good aim. I think this is the only implementation of this change that I would be even moderately okay with. They could also make weapons one-shot through walls depending on class, like maybe DMRs and snipers could still one-shot as well. Outside of this though, Ubisoft would want to make a lot of balancing changes to solve a lot of the balancing issues that I discussed previously. Firstly, Ubisoft would likely have to buff a lot of defender weapons to rebalance the game so that defenders could still compete with attackers, buffing their damage, fire rate, or both. Secondly, they would likely have to remove the armor system altogether to make every operator's health stat fair, or they would at the very least have to change a lot of operators' ratings around. This is the only way they would be able to solve the likely problem of a lot of people prioritizing and abusing the health of operators. They would likely need to slow down the game again to remedy the aggression problems as well, by either slowing movement speeds, nerfing ADS speeds, or some other measures, but this could be monitored. However, even in this hypothetical scenario where Ubisoft removed one-shot headshot and implemented these changes, I'd still be against it. I've always been curious about what the game would look like with one-shot headshot removed, mainly because it's an idea that's been presented by people in the community for years. However, my opinion on the subject has always been the same. I think part of Siege's character is the headshot mechanic. Without it, Siege would no longer be the same game. Also, as I've attempted to show in this video by walking through the possibilities of what would happen after such a change, I think removing headshots would do irreparable damage to the game's balancing. It would throw off all of the work Ubisoft did for years balancing weapons, and it would likely give the attack a massive advantage in fights. But hey, maybe that would be a good thing to help balance out the fact that time is against them. If you look to other games that have fast time to kills like Siege, but with headshots not existing, they all tend to have an aggressive playstyle. Titanfall 2 and Call of Duty all come to mind in that regard. Now, obviously, there are other factors that go into these games being so aggressive, like their movement and their game modes, but it still shows that mechanics like this complement an aggressive playstyle. However, even with all these problems that would come up with implementing a change like this, it's still a fun idea to think about. Obviously, this is all speculation. We don't really know how this hypothetical scenario would play out until it was actually done and released to the public. But this is how I hypothesize this kind of change would go based on the way metas have shifted in the past. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed today's video covering what would happen if one-shot headshot was removed from R6. As always, this video is strictly my opinion, and if you disagree, feel free to leave your takes in the comments down below. I'm genuinely curious to see what your guys' thoughts are on the idea of removing headshots from Siege, even if we may not agree on whether it should stay in the game or be removed. If you did enjoy today's video, I make Siege content just like this twice a week, so go subscribe to the channel and follow me on Twitter if you don't want to miss the next upload. If you want to watch another video just like this one, a video will be popping up on your screen right now that I'm sure you'll enjoy it. I'll see you next time, friends, and peace.
Op 4 eliminated.